The one right here. Why I Am Not a Feminist by Jessa Crispin. I recently listened to this audiobook, and now I'm going to say right now, I feel like there may be some people who watch this review of mine, listen to this review of mine, who might no doubt be offended by what I have to say in some kind of way, but I assure you it's not my intention to offend anyone. And because the author of this, well, it may seem like, originally, I guess I mostly decided to listen to this just based on the title, because for me, I tend to be one of those people who, for me, first off, I will say, I've never really cared about what people believe in. For me, I feel that I've always felt everyone has the right to believe whatever they want to believe. As long as, they're not hurting others, physically, emotionally, but especially physically, for me, I don't care if somebody wants to worship a box of Twinkies. As long as, they're not physically harming, a bunch of innocent people, I feel like, hey, if somebody wants to worship a box of Twinkies, let them worship a box of Twinkies. What? And granted, that may sound like, that definitely may sound ridiculous to a lot of people, but I use that example as, just in order to frame, my own opinion about this particular kind of thing, in which, when it comes to, people labeling themselves as feminist or not feminist, or, Republican or Democrat, or liberal or not liberal, or, or whatever else people choose to label themselves as, I'm cool with. I'm completely cool with. It's just that for me, I've always felt like, especially for the better half of most of my adult life, which, by the way, I'm 35. I'm currently 35 years old. For those of you who didn't know, so for most of my adult life, I've never really felt the need to identify as, something like Democrat or Republican or liberal or, other than, really the only thing I've ever felt the need to identify as is a human, a human being, or if you want to get technical, Homo sapien. Other than that, yeah, and granted, yeah, I've grown up in, just like any other human being, I've grown up and was raised to believe in certain labels, certain roles, certain identities, but ultimately, once I got to the point where I could decide for myself, I chose to, not really give in to those labels that so many of my relatives had already given into, or, in some way, like they felt they had to give into them, otherwise they wouldn't be accepted by their peers or other family members. And so, yeah. But as far as this audiobook is concerned, I like that the author, she quickly points out the fact that whether you consider yourself to be a feminist or not, she does point out the fact that feminism in itself is not immune to hypocrisy. Just like with anything else. Pretty much everything is, nothing, really nothing, and no one is immune to hypocrisy. So I like that the author is quick to point that out, pretty much like within the first couple of chapters or so. So I like that. I will say that there did seem to be some kind of minor inconsistencies for me, and I guess more towards the latter half of this audiobook. Because, for the most part, I feel like, she definitely made some pretty good points, some interesting points. If not good, then at the very least, interesting points. The fact that, which I believe can be applied to any movement of any sort. The fact that when it comes to feminism and the feminist movement, the fact that anytime any kind of movement becomes popular and becomes part of the mainstream, usually what happens is it's pretty much, I guess you could say, like, loses its pureness, its raw nature, its original intent, I guess, for lack of, any other, for lack of better words, or in which, like, I completely agree with, and, which I feel like can be applied to anything, not just with feminism, but with other things too. Just like with, you could say, anything that has to do with pop culture, really. Anytime there's that kind of like trend that takes hold and becomes part of the mainstream, and anytime you get enough people talking about it, sharing it with each other, then right away it loses its original intent, whatever that may be. Whether doesn't matter if it's just if it involves sharing music with each other, if it involves sharing literature with each other, or if it involves much more pertinent information like political movements, societal movements, and whatnot. And ultimately, unfortunately, what ends up happening most of the time, obviously not all the time, but most of the time, when something becomes part of the mainstream, then it loses its, original intent. And that's something that this author, that she tries to get across. And I feel that she definitely does get across. And at the same time, too, I will admit that, I feel like the way in which she makes her points can definitely come across as just being purely offensive. Even though she doesn't just, she doesn't flat out put down feminism. What she does do is explain why she feels feminism is not what it used to be, or at least, it's not what it used to be. It's not being used or promoted in the way in which some of the original, I guess you could say, feminist activists, I suppose. And forgive me if I'm not using the correct words, but I'm just using the words that, some of the words that the author used herself. When it's not used in the original way or promoted in the original way that some of the very first feminist activists intended. And, that's pretty much the gist of what this author talks about, at least in this audiobook. Another thing I like that she does bring up is the fact that, pretty much the fact that everyone, that all of us, not just women, but men too, are caught in this patriarchal society, in this, by which, it's kind of like, men, like most men, feel the need to outdo each other and just constantly be in this like aggressive race to the top of each profession, no matter what it is, At the same time, women also feel like, and of course this doesn't, I'm not saying this applies to every woman, but based on, I'm just going off what this author mentions. At the same time, she talks about how a lot of women also feel a need to compete with men. When it comes to like the business world, to compete with men, but unfortunately, the only way in which they know how to do it is to pretty much model their own careers they model their own careers based on what they've seen men do. So pretty much all you have is like, a bunch of men racing each other to the top aggressively. At the same time, you have women who are also in the business world, trying to do the same thing that men do. And yeah, some of them are very successful at it. But at the same time, the author is quick to mention the fact that she believes that by women trying to keep up with, the same aggressive kind of business ethic, as men, that really doesn't help anyone, especially the feminist movement, or any kind of movement leaning towards feminism. So, and I guess for me, like, I kind of see where she's coming from, because I've often felt like the fact that, I've often noticed, even with, when it comes to like my own sister, my niece, my mom, pretty much almost every one of my female friends, female relatives, I see them, they feel like they have to look a certain way in order to be accepted by men, or they have to think a certain way, act a certain way in order to find a boyfriend or a husband. And which for me, that definitely seems ridiculous. And I like that the author, she points that out too, the fact that, hey, women should not have to concern themselves with, projecting a certain kind of image or coming off a certain way just so they can, get the approval of men. Which, yeah, I totally agree with, that's something that I feel also too. Like, I've always felt that the same could apply to men as well. Although, for the sake of this, because for the audiobook, especially, when it comes to women, I've always felt like, hey, you should just be yourself no matter what. Yeah. As a man, I can say, I can honestly say most men, most of us are pretty messed up. and in a nutshell, that's what this author mentions too. Although she kind of comes off a bit more bluntly. Yeah. But she pretty much says the same thing, the fact that most men are messed up. And also, too, that women, should not women should not seek the approval of men. Because for me, the way I interpreted that was pretty much just, again, be yourself no matter what. If a man can't accept that, or if no one can accept your true self, then you know what, to hell with them. To hell with them, you don't need them in your life. You're probably better off anyways, so, yeah. Because there's so many other points that this author, that she brings up, again, which I feel like most people probably would be offended by, but others would probably actually question, and then still even more would probably be like, well, I really don't know what to think. And I don't know. All in all, I found it intriguing. I mean, even though I will say I wouldn't necessarily consider this to be like what's the word? I wouldn't consider this to be like the pivotal feminist manifesto or anything like that, but it is interesting nonetheless. Very intriguing. Again, the author, she brings up a lot of interesting points, and of course, I'm not saying that I completely agree with everything she mentions. Only some things, which I've already mentioned. Overall, I feel like the biggest thing for me is that, just be yourself no matter what. And I feel like that's, if nothing else, that is the biggest thing anyone can take away from this audiobook or book. And so, ultimately, I guess I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah. Probably like 3.5 at the least. So, but I feel like could easily round up to 4, so 4 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that'll do it for my review of this. Let me know if you've read this or listened to the audiobook too, so I'd like to know other people's opinions of this, so yeah. That pretty much does it. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. As always, next time, don't forget, keep it real, keep on rocking, and peace.